Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Man, I never thought I'd make 90% of the episodes at night this year. Just this winter's been ridiculously cold. And the days have it's been gross. So this is when I got the time, when it's 52 degrees outside. As you can see, this is going to be about the existence of space. Now, for you hardcore listeners, you know there was an episode already on this. It was called Does Space Exist? I'm pretty sure it's season 1. Because there was a bit of an overlap between MK Ultra Radio recordings and this show. Because the whole thing popped out of the thing that I always say, that I realize that I dream of all kinds of stuff, man. I had a super lucid dream last night. Oh my God. But I realized that even having, let me just butcher the human language here. The English language. The human English language. Despite being a sci-fi junkie. Now, I don't watch absolutely everything. Like, if the show sucks, I won't watch it. But, all the classics, man, all the Star Wars, all the Star Treks. Star Trek, I would say I've watched them all 2 to 5 times. Every episode. But just anything. I'm sure there's quite a few of you out there really like science fiction stuff. All the little one-off movies and all that kind of stuff. Despite being very into that genre, I realized that I have never, ever dreamed of being in space. I've never dreamed of being on a spaceship, being a X-wing fighter, a Y-wing fighter. I haven't even dreamed of being on the Death Star. I haven't dreamed of being at any one of the locations in Star Trek, from the Vulcan planets to the I would probably not want to dream about being on the Klingon planets, but the Romulans, Ferengis, Bajoran, any one of those. None of the Enterprise ships, not Deep Space Nine. And, so I asked Kyle, my buddy Kyle. He's got 2 Emmys for science fiction based special effects stuff. He worked on Star Trek way back in the 90s as a really young lad, but he got a job with the guy that was doing all the special effects for Babylon 5. He's done all of Battlestar Galactica, which is where he got one of the Emmys, and the other one was the Firefly movie. And I said, dude, you live inside cameras in a virtual world, setting up all the shots for space stuff. Have you ever had a dream? And he sat there for a second. He goes, no. How's that possible? I'm like, yeah. So he went to work the next day, asked everyone he works with. Some of these dudes have been doing this for 40 years. Nope. Not a single person in his office. We ask other people. No one. Now, how is it that I've dreamed about being in a bunch of weird places, but never in space, when that's something that I would absolutely love to do? If it's something in my mind, right? I'm supposed to dream it. I could play World of Warcraft for 3 hours and to definitely be in this questing archetypal theme dream, which usually racks my sleep. So then I thought, okay, is it just that I haven't been there, so I can't dream about it? Which would actually reveal something very interesting about dreaming. I'll give you an example. As a kid, when I was a baby, or a little boy, my parents took me all over Europe. Now, I don't think I have any memories of that. I definitely couldn't tell you about being in Paris or being in Munich or whatever. But I was in Berlin as a kid. It was like, I've been around. I've also been to England 3 times. Been to Sydney once. So the idea is, I don't dream about those places either, but I've been there. So is there something about proximity that controls our dreaming? But it's a very famous phrase I get right now. I get it like almost a Tourette's comment. You know, if I made a video about moving furniture in my front room and I talked about the space between my sofa and the coffee table and the space between my coffee table and my TV, some numbnut's gonna fucking reply, "Space doesn't exist." Depends, full. It's like, relax, man. Relax. Make a bigger point than this goddamn cliche response that keeps going all over the place. Again, this is deep thoughts, not just thoughts, right? It's Tourette's. It's like you got something that falls into the forefront of your mind and then you just say it. And that's one of the things that Americans do that's really embarrassing sometimes. And sometimes it can be extremely funny. But this idea that we don't incubate a single molecule of our thought process before we just blurt it out. Now, some countries like England, God bless all my British friends, sometimes some of the older generation could sit there forever trying to think about what the hell they're going to say. And you get it all over the place where you get someone who's really thinking about what they're going to say. You know, it just gets like you're sitting there going, oh my God, dude, just take a poop already and relax and just start speaking from the soul. And you won't have to worry about bullshitting someone or picking the wrong words. And, you know, it's a little digression on communication protocol. Douglas Adams, in his last two books of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was then after the BBC series was turned into two books, he ended up writing those two books. And then because of demand, he wrote another two books. A guy named Dirk Maggs, you know, I had the privilege of communicating with and then hiring his sound guy, one of his sound guys, Paul Weir, from my video game company. He went and reprised the other two, he ended up doing the other two books, so 3 and 4. And there's a beautiful, you can just listen to it, man. I don't remember this because I don't think I actually read the last two books. I thought I did, but I didn't. I think my dad read them and I thought he told me about them or whatever, because my father and I read the first couple books together, like out loud to each other, which is cool. We're on some trip together to Florida. But anyway, there was a race in this story of his. And again, Douglas Adams is probably, I don't know, man. The guy was sort of an alien. He's more than just a genius. He just seemed to, man, just grasp the entire universe. I mean, the amount of metaphor you put together that is sort of biblical, you know, that reusable metaphor you can use to think about things. And I'm going to use it right now. It was just seemingly inexhaustible. And he died, I think, a death of like a heart attack or something, really young, super sad. He was always proud that his initials were DNA. That was pretty cool. I can't remember what his middle name was. But anyway, he developed this race on this planet that for whatever reason had never looked up. They didn't acknowledge up. And then I think it was Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent, who land on the planet, I think, and they didn't know where they came from because they were like, well, we came from up there. And they're like, well, what's up there? And this was a race that sang songs to each other. It was really funny, which was the Aborigine do that. They sing their history to each other. They sing when they speak. It's the most beautiful thing that I hadn't seen until my late 40s, because I think very few people have recorded it. But it got me thinking, a race that doesn't look up. So when someone says space doesn't exist, it's not like we're all sitting there going, that's heresy, you know. But what gives us the impression that it exists? And then what is everything else? That's going to be my theme in this particular episode. So, you know, there's a couple schools of thought here. And we got to parse this a little bit. There are flat earthers and there are globers. Now, your globers, they automatically typically believe in space because they're NASA disciples. Again, an organization that has lied almost every single day that it's been in existence is feeding people their basis in reality. I happen to think it's a globe because bubbles in water are round and ether is like water, and we are like the plasma ball, except it's water. It's oxygen inside of a bubbly substance, right? It's a default shape, I believe, is what was it Vivian Kubrick told me that? Whoever said it, I love that idea. Then you have the other school of thought, which is that it's a flat Earth. Now, I just read an article. I've been searching all over the place to see if someone can kind of catalyze me into the next realm. I'm still working on the Tesla death ray information, and I've suddenly realized, as a little digression here, that the amount of true information about that invention is very, very sparse. You search on YouTube, and it's a joke. Either you have these numbskulls creating this really super bad Earth scanning reality show, or they're faking their surprise and they're faking everything is really interesting and monumental, or you get these 1 minute videos, 1.5 minute videos, and the fuckers have the audacity to roll credits for 20 seconds. You're like, dude, you talked for like 1 minute and you got 24 seconds afterwards, and it's like cameraman, producer, and it's like, oh, fuck off. Seriously. Yeah, you're knocking it out of the park there, Mr. fucking Steven Spielberg. Probably get a nice dose of profanity out of the way. I have Big Picture 2020 cooking in my office right now, rendering. Okay, so you think it's flat Earth, and the flat Earth thing is utterly died out. It doesn't mean that anyone's belief systems have changed. It's just that there's no new evidence, there's no new stuff. And I understand it's very difficult to do. It's hard to start your own space agency to figure this out. They have gagged Antarctica travel, so you can't go down there and take a look. And they've gagged airspace. Plus, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to do anything, over, I don't know, a few miles up. What we get about 22 miles up with just regular devices, weather balloons and that kind of stuff. But the battle between a flat earther and a glober, aside from the evidence, assessments, right? People think they see certain things and they do or they don't. You're not seeing a round earth in a plane. Okay. You don't see the curvature of the earth in a plane. The guy that went up in the Red Bull thing and jumped out, everything he shot up there was a total fisheye. Like, what's wrong with just bringing a regular landscape camera? Why do the fisheye? Or at least bring one, and then you can do all your, GoPros after that. Because they're always trying to forge the notion this place is round. And here I am, a guy who believes it's round. I may not believe it's the traditional thing. But anyway, my belief doesn't really matter in this episode. But the flat earthers will typically create a sort of a reservoir that says NASA is trying to kill God. I just read some article that was talking about how we're not on Mars, and we're not. But their whole emphasis was that NASA is trying to kill God. And so I'm sitting here going, maybe, I guess, but I mean, how could that? I don't know. I mean, I guess you're gnawing it down slowly over time. It's like you've got a hatchet and you're trying to chop down the biggest redwood tree in Muir Woods or something. That's huge. And plus what you chop down will grow back a little bit. So I don't really see how that's a direct correlation. What, God can't create space? How absurd is that? Do we have such a narcissistic, weak impression of ourselves that God is not allowed to create another puppy dog in the house, right? It's like we're the puppy dog and someone else brought another puppy dog, or we're the grown-up dog and God's not allowed to bring a puppy in Because then our attention is it's not all ours, right? If that noise I just made annoys you, that's what I feel like when someone's trying to say, there's no aliens out there, there's nothing out there, God can't do anything but pay attention completely to us. I find that logic just so incredibly selfish, immature, ignorant, and flawed. Okay? Now, the solution may not have anything to do with that black stuff we see up there with this sparkly net up there. But it's like when someone says that gravity doesn't exist. Okay, dude. All we are calling the definition of gravity before science is that if you drop shit, it falls down. That's what we're calling gravity. So don't tell me that doesn't fucking exist, man. Okay, the theory of it's complete bullshit because ether's been erased from the universe, meaning our planet, right? We're not allowed to believe it. In so many contextual ways of looking at it, right? But when I look up, I see a blackness at night. If I'm out in the middle of nowhere like Havasu Lake, I'm seeing the most incredible, beautiful, I don't know, about 1,200 stars. I'm seeing this Milky Way just wrap right down the middle. Looks chaotic to me. Doesn't look like the Electric Light Parade at Disneyland, now California Park. That's where they run that parade now. So something is up there. Because there seems to be some space between the top of my head and those hanging orbs up there. I call it space. Now, whether or not it's a firmament dome with spheres up there, glowing plasma, our moderator Dave, again, Dave, you got to start taking more of those shots because they're just phenomenal. But he has this amazing zoom lens and he gets up there and he films, I'm assuming out of his backyard or something, stars with his camera. He'll pull all the way back and push all the way in so you can see where you are. And it's like this glowing plasma, like mohawks and all kinds of stuff on these spheres. And if you think it's an anomaly of the camera, well, he's shaking the camera because he can't hold something completely still at 100 zoom, right? And the mohawks stay attached to the sphere. If you think it's an anomaly of the atmosphere, well, that doesn't make any sense because, again, these mohawk things that he has filmed stay attached to the sphere. So even as he's shaking the camera, they're right there. Just like someone just put a plasma mohawk right down the center of their head. Well, the atmosphere would most likely be moving and shaking. If it's a firmament dome and you think you're looking through water, well, water would be moving. Have you ever seen an anomaly in a pool? The reflections in a pool just stay there? No, they're constantly moving and shaking because it's liquid. All right. So it would seem that between us and what Dave is filming, it kind of looks like it might be a true, I don't know. I don't want to say vacuum because we have an atmosphere. The whole thing about, again, you know, it's funny. I have a buddy of mine that will, he's a flat earther, and he'll try to tell a friend why, you know, little proofs. But the one he says is like, well, how could you hold an atmosphere to a round ball? Wouldn't it just dissipate? If you had a vacuum outside this sphere, how could you hold an atmosphere to a ball? Well, I've told him 1,000 times what ether is. I've told him 1,000 times there is no true vacuum in space. It's this stuff called ether. Because the sphere of plasma at the center of the earth and the center of all celestial bodies blocks either absolute or blocks the overwhelming majority of ether that would be passing through the earth, you will then create, even in a computer simulation, you will create a push down to the surface of the earth from random chaotic winds of space hitting the sphere. But because we have a Van Allen belt, which is the orbital electrons, right? You got dielectric wave bouncing off this plasma core, and you've got stuff that missed the Earth as it was, coming towards it, but because it's blocking, it's creating negative pressure. That's how the atmosphere is held to a sphere. Okay? It's sort of like saying, how could a bubble exist in water? Because, man, water is a pressure that pushes on this sphere of air, and it's pushing from all sides. Have you ever had a beer? Here's a good test for your brain. You got a beer, or soda, but beer is better because you can see through it, right? Maybe a 7-Up, huh? Even cola, right? Have you ever looked inside one of those glasses and seen bubbles that aren't spheres? I mean, you might have like an egg-shaped one for a split second, but have you ever seen one that's shaped like stars, like a 5-pointed star? How about one that's shaped like a toothpick? One that's shaped like a donut with a hole in the middle? No. Because the base physics that hold this whole place together starts at the ethereal level, the smallest particle in the universe, and constitutes itself up to the bubble in the water. I'm trying to undo your knee-jerk reaction if you're one of these newcomers that's never heard these arguments before. It's not a proof. Maybe it's a proof you don't understand what you're talking about, but But let's just say we got a couple ways we can go about this that are at least giant ways of doing it if the official story of the Earth is not true, meaning NASA's impression of the whole thing, which, by the way, millions of people thought it was the way NASA thought it was before NASA ever existed. So just understand. Yes, I understand that the flat Earth theory was the way we thought of the Earth probably around 550 years ago. But if you really research things, again, even the Egyptians, their sign for a year is a circle with an empty space in the middle, which is the sun, meaning an orbit around the sun was 1 year. And then their symbol for the moon, or for the month, is a circle filled in, which could either be the moon or could be Earth. And that's, the circles. These people from outer space, just telling you, we're probably from outer space. I don't know if the inability to dream of this region has anything to do with what I was talking about in a previous episode about the intelligence threshold. We're not allowed to have thoughts that think our way out of this reality, right? Meaning the characters in the book are not allowed to think about themselves existing outside of the pages in the book. We're not allowed to know how this place is put together. And it's not like that's a prison. It's because it may end up destroying everything for us. The beauty of this world that's been created. Wouldn't it be a bummer to find out that it really is just this existence without having it explained to you how the matrix works? Again, if you found the dome wall, I think that there would be almost a subliminal theme in your heart that would say, well, my belief in God is either going to be there with a sphere or it's going to be there with a flat earth. So it really doesn't, it's never going to take away your belief in a creator. That's something you hold within you if you have it. And if you don't, you don't. And I made a comment about atheists and just an experience I had when I was younger. I want to make a distinction. If you're a happy atheist, then any of the comments I made in the past about some of the atheists that I know that are just unhappy with being atheists, it's like they're just angry, If that's not you, then I'm not talking about you. And I think there's more people that are content with it than anything else. Overwhelming majority. But if you really found out that we're in a petri dish and you really could conceive of how tiny it is, because the world's going to seem huge until you find out there's borders around it and a dome overhead. Now, maybe at that point you assume, oh my God, there really is just us and God is completely paying attention to us. Is that really going to make you super happy? I mean, don't you think that's the case regardless of what shape the earth is? I do. But imagine now you want to have a a life that has choice. And now, when you look up, you're really kind of seeing God's eyeball looking right down at you. And now it's like, oh my God, if you go obsessed with it, you might be in a realm where you self-destruct mentally because you know you're sinning, according to whatever religion you're believing in at the time. And you're just being looked at constantly. Nobody likes being stared at by someone that they don't know. And you don't know God. Nobody knows God. Right? I mean, maybe some crazy people do, but we can assume what God might be like. But God could be a computer that doesn't even care. Just exist. You're never going to die. So don't worry about it. Just keep going in circles. This reality is all you got, man. So enjoy it. Don't try to figure out too much, because then you'll lose the magic of the world, the mystery of the world. But let's say we reconcile that we're good with both groups. We're good with the flat earth group, and we're good with the ball earth people in the next argument we're going to make, or the next observation we're going to make. And so we then have to decide, okay, where are we? And what is this black map that's up there? It's blue during the day. I mean, my God, can you imagine if it was red? How bizarre the world would look. Thank God it's not pure white. But okay, so we get this extra interesting thing that happens at night. If you think about information being input into a computer or something, well, if we told a computer and an artificial intelligence, look up, this camera is always going to be on the roof, and despite all the other cameras you might have mounted inside a Boston Dynamics robot, which you can inhibit and run around the world, the one up, I want you to pay attention to that one. Tell me what you think. And the artificial intelligence, you ask it about 2:00 in the afternoon, what do you see? I see blue skies and some clouds. It might rain today. Looks like you could get a tan today. Make sure and wear your cancer-causing sunscreen. But now, it's nighttime. It's winter. It's winter solstice, December 21st, meaning the shortest day of the year. So now we ask it about 5:30. We put it in a nice, remote community so we can get a really good observation of the sky. And we say, what do you see? He probably says the 2010 line, oh my God, it's full of stars. But he says, I see these white, shiny crystals in the sky. And there's a weird mosaic that stretches across the center of it. What is that? I say, well, we'll come back tomorrow. We'll talk about that. But you keep watching it. Then you come back 8 hours later and you say, well, what else have you seen? Well, they all seem to rotate. New ones are coming up from the horizon on the west, and the ones on the east are going away. I actually can't remember what what the rotation on that is, directionally speaking. And then it wants to know, what is that? Well, what are you going to say? With an optic that's simply identical to the human eye, without giving the AI a telescope or access to an array of telescopes or some orbital telescope, it's going to be probably just as mystified as us. Something's up there. If it's some elaborate thing made by a god, then there's an interesting design quality to it. Because what is space in terms of, or what words or adjectives could you use to describe what we see on an average day? Well, it's chaotic, right? They're just everywhere. Their brightness differs. But then there's this Milky Way thing. I mean, that's what we call it anyway. They say it's the edge of our galaxy. But like I've said before, what do they say our galaxy is? They say it's a spinning disk, because they've shown us all these photographs. I have never looked through an optic and ever seen a galaxy. Galaxies, in terms of spiral galaxies, They only exist in print for me. What about you? They're not web pages, of course. I've never seen one. Let me know if you've ever looked at an optic and seen one. I've been to the Griffith Observatory and supposedly looked at Jupiter. I've been in my friend's backyard and looked at Saturn. That was definitely very real. I think we turned it to Jupiter too that night. But if you were to really put trillions of stars in some disk, and then we are looking at its bisection, right? We're looking at them all lined up on each other. I wouldn't say bisection, but looking at it from a horizontal compression. Well, is light not as powerful as we think? Because all the stars we're supposed to be seeing are actually in our galaxy, but it would seem that according to these cosmologists that tell us we're in a galaxy, it would seem that light is probably 99% missing from this galaxy. Because wouldn't it be the brightest thing you've ever seen? Haven't you seen these pictures of galaxies, right? Sure, there's some nebulas out there, maybe blocking some stuff, but there must be a giant wall between us and the center of the galaxy if the Milky Way is truly what they're saying it is. But now, again, if it's God's doing, God's creation, there's a weird thing about space, because the idea is like, why would you even make it? It's like that story in Douglas Adams' book. It's the third or fourth Hitchhiker's Guide. Can't remember which one. I always listen to it in radio form, so I never know what book I'm in. It's been made. Well, you're God, and you believe in God. So, when you believe in God, you tend to attach to things intent, purpose. If there is no God, or God is a very omnipotent, non-interfering creature, then things could just be. It's true. But it's there, and it's undeniable. Can't see it during the day. I mean, just a little bit of atmosphere reflecting blue, we can't see it anymore. It's weird. So, yours truly, especially with Dave's analysis through his camera, and these spheres that keep falling all over Earth. And again, it looks very machine-made, but then again, the whole idea is like, what if we're in some weird, Terry Gilliam movie, and it's some Brazil flat Earth movie, and so those places basically falling apart. I reported once, a couple of years ago, the fact that NASA has admitted that stars are disappearing out of our visual spectrum. For no reason, they're just disappearing. Well, one could get really creative and say, okay, these are spheres that are attached to the inside of a giant dome, which was one of the first theories of what stars were, which is why they called them falling stars, right? Comets always go down. They never go up. Ever. They can go across, and depending on how you're oriented looking at them, you might think they went over your head. But the thing I've never seen, either recorded or in real life, and I have seen so many falling stars, shooting stars, meteorites is what they want you to think. But they've always come straight down. If we're just this random ball in space and there's a bunch of debris in space, then at some point you should be staring at the horizon and a meteor goes up towards over your head. Should be the case, but that's never the case. At least that I've ever seen. One of the most brilliant shooting stars I've ever seen in my life. I was working for Jim Hall Racing when I first came out here, and we were driving through Los Angeles really late at night, but we're up on this hill from Ventura County to LA County called the Grade. And so really up high, and this super, super bright, and I mean just bizarre diamond rotating brightness, not a phosphorus glowing, burning meteor like, I've seen those too in Kansas. But looked like a diamond was falling out of the sky, and it went super fast, just straight down to the earth. From our vantage point, it looked like it was going to impact, South Los Angeles. And I was like, just two guys, just my roommate and myself, and we're looking straight and we're like, whoa, and having just recently come out of Kansas and where you can see all the stars at night. And I've seen shooting stars that are so furry and huge. It's like a firework going off at Disneyland. I've had it, I think I mentioned this once before. I was having just a minor disagreement with a girlfriend, my high school sweetheart, and we're just kind of outside, just debating something. I can't even remember. But then she couldn't see because she's staring at me, but I was looking at her and I could look over the roof of this house. And this big giant shooting star went over us. I was just gobsmacked, man. And that immediately stopped the argument. We went and laid down on the trampoline, where then we saw jet aircraft pull U-turns and nothing flat. It was the weirdest thing. It seemed like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? So that you see them enter the atmosphere with this phosphorus glow. And then we were literally watching, one of those triple light situations, red and green, to give you orientation with a white light somewhere on there. And it was just flying and flying. And then, I kid you not, it just turned like a U-turn and came back the other way. It must have been no more than the width of the craft to the other side as it changed directions. And, aircraft doesn't do that. Satellites don't do that, as far as I know. So, really weird evening. So let me throw this theory at you. This is what I'm trying to get to. There's a lot of us that think that maybe reality is nothing more than a global consensus. I have an episode called Consensus Reality that talks all about it, which is that we as a species are merely hive-minding our brains. And we're imagining this whole place, all the senses that we suffer. But it's a communal thought, right? I'll give you a super bad analogy, but imagine you're eating at one of those restaurants that has the big lazy Susan in the middle. A lot of Asian restaurants have this, right? There's a lot of food in the center, and the waiter, he's bringing food over. But once everything's on the table, now we're all taking turns eating the food off the plates, and we're rotating this thing to get to the next dish, and we're eating, and we're watching each other eat something off of the plates, right? So as we do this, we're all conceding that overall, Jim took a wing of chicken and Mike took a turkey leg and I took some mashed potatoes. Now, someone might be looking down at their plate and they're not noticing that these subtractions have been made. However, because we're hive-minding, even though they're looking down, they're getting the update through the network that those items are missing. It's in the back channels of the brain, not in the frontal lobe. So it's not like they're seeing it, but when they look up and look at it, it's missing. And they may actually, as a human being, be surprised. Oh my God, who ate all the mashed potatoes? Then I say, not me, and I got mashed potatoes all over my mouth. But their reality machine is on a different level in their brain. So if you had a dual channel system, we're all conceding that this stuff exists. Perhaps you believe my backyard exists because over thousands of years, we have conceded what shape the earth is. Initially, we all went with flat. But 500 years ago, the Jesuits, if that's truly a true story, started funding the changing of the shape of the earth. Maybe one community believed a long time ago, like the Egyptians, that it was round. But a bunch of other folks kept thinking it was flat. Well, the Egyptians were more advanced. They had pi and Pythagoras theorem and everything before any of those people existed. And us kind of dopey folks in Europe kept thinking it was flat. Well, now, through publicity, through CG, through special effects and paintings and all this other stuff, an organization funding hundreds of other organizations, plus our textbooks, plus fiction on TV, are essentially changing our global consensus. What's the Mandela effect? The Mandela effect could simply be the competition for which group of people believe something the most. Well, the Berenstain Bears are believed by Europe because it's a British name that's used, and as I understand it, And there's twice as many people in Europe as there are in the United States. And so the United States had Berenstain. Well, when the internet happened, the consensus machine, again, it's the conscious layer, sinks into the subconscious layer of consensus. And then all of a sudden we have all these discrepancies. If someone asked me who Eli Whitney was, I kind of answer it now like, well, when I was young, it was a black guy. Now it's a white guy. Inventor of the cotton gin. Weird. But some folks were raised with what is now, even in the United States, they were raised with what is now the consensus. None of my close friends ever thought he was a white guy. Everyone in my lounge thought he was black. All my closest friends and relatives thought he was black. And all of a sudden he's white. Interesting. Well, if you're a white supremacist trying to change history, wouldn't that be an interesting little modification in history? Yeah, we'll just erase every single article everywhere that the guy was ever black and just make him white, because that means their race did it, right? So why would the earth be here in any shape at all? And then there's this stuff up there that's black with these little stars, if it's a consensus reality. Was it that someone started some story a long time ago? You know, the Native Americans have just one of the most beautiful belief systems with the stars. They say the stars are made up of all the souls that essentially ascended to heaven. They don't really believe in a heaven. They believe in stars. Well, we know the Egyptians, through the god Anut, believed that the stars were painted on the inside of her body. And that her feet are on one side and her whole bosom goes all the way over to her hands. And she's just painted with stars. It's interesting. So did the stars come first? Or did man come first? Of course, any normal scientist would say stars obviously came first. Let me throw you a wild card here that I think is very interesting with this type of argument. What if everything exists right now? And the only problem that we are running into, not really a problem, but the only issue we're running into, is that it takes us a long time to see it. And as we see it, it starts to exist for all of us. And before we can see it, it's whatever it is. Now, again, there's so many interesting things about the Flat Earth Proof book that is sort of undeniable. This notion that we're moving really, really fast, that the equator is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, but someone really close to the North or South Pole is barely moving at all. And somehow you can fly a plane from London to Cairo. And there's no correction for the fact that you are gaining, 700 miles an hour in horizontal movement as you're making a vertical dive straight down, latitude-wise. Seems like you'd have to haul ass to catch up with it. And I'll throw you some support here, my flat earthers. Anytime someone, and you guys have probably already heard this, but on the idea of latitude acceleration, when someone says, creating a time machine is very difficult, because if you were to say, I'm going to go back to 1865 and watch a speech or something. I can't remember when the Gettysburg Address was made. It's a 2-minute speech. But physicists, even cosmologists will tell you, okay, well then the Earth was in a completely different place in the universe. Or / galaxy, if that's even true. And so you're not only going to have to figure out a way to travel back in time, but you're going to have to move in an XYZ coordinate to go back to where Earth was at that point so you can step on the surface again. Because if you just transport right now, you'll be out in the middle of space, right? Okay, so they're willing to acknowledge a correction in a time machine such that you can be where the Earth is. But when a plane takes off from London and flies to Cairo, and I'd say like, I don't know exactly what it would be rotationally, 350, something like that in London, maybe 400 tops. But when you're in Cairo, you're moving 1,000 miles an hour, roughly. 900 something, really high. How are you accounting for the fact that you've just gained all this lateral movement? So I understand. Helicopters just taking off and hovering. All right. Just say you built a helicopter that could fly for 12 hours. It has enough fuel just to sit there for 12 hours. It just hovers off the ground like 50 feet. And it's locked into some cool computer controlled thing. So you can just sit there and just sit there for 12 hours. Hell, at 50 feet, you could probably run the fuel straight up to the vehicle. Now, it would seem that if we're on a round Earth, no matter how much you want to say the atmosphere influences your speed laterally, you're going to be separating from the Earth, which is moving, supposedly rotating at a particular speed. Why isn't this thing eventually see the Earth kind of move away from it? And just say, yeah, see, kids, that's why we know we're on a ball. Boom. So the interesting thing of saying that, you know, again, because we know the ether exists, because we've proved it, it calls out to space having, for all intents and purposes, a infinite amount of mass out there called ether particles. It's what's holding this whole thing together. So if you're a flat earther, you have to explain ether existing, the fact that we do have Fibonacci patterns that seem to exist at the micro level and the macro level, meaning the same book of physics is controlling the whole thing, aka matrix programming, controls the whole thing. But the interesting thing is, why do the stars exist if there was no space? It's a dome, let's say. It's another sphere around the sphere, let's say. Why make an inquisitive bait for the human consciousness? You're baiting man to look up, unlike that other culture. You're baiting us to want to go there. Because why? Well, we're pattern creatures. And when we get tired of a pattern, we want to change the pattern. Why do people move from city to city all the time? And some people stay in their hometown for their whole life. Well, some people are more susceptible to pattern fatigue and others find comfort. Those that find comfort stay in their hometown. Those that want to move around, move around. I will say that there is just having known some wealthy people, or knowing some wealthy people right now, there's a sadness I have for folks that constantly tell me how they have to travel the world. Now, I respect the fact they want to see the world, but there seems to be, some of my friends have a disease almost of the mind where they will never be in any one place forever until their bodies just expire. And then then you're in basically a prison. Because not only does your body not allow you to travel, well, now what are you, in a hospice? Are you in some assisted living? And now you're just so stuck in one place. That's why, as part of a mental discipline, I eat the same meal every day. Because life doesn't change every day. If you want to fall in love with someone, they don't change every day. So at some point, you have to develop the skill set to love the same thing every day. So us answering the question of the motive to create space, the star map, very specifically, with this Milky Way, because there's two sides of the game, plus there's planets out there. Jesus. It's like, could you possibly bait man anymore? I mean, we've talked about the moon and Mars 100 times on this show. All right, well, once man saw the moon, man wants to find out what the hell that thing is. We want to go up there. We want to step on it. We want to see if we can live there. We want to see if there's fun stuff up there. Has anyone ever been there before? I mean, I looked at a bunch of moon photos the other day, and, you know, there are definitely big protruding rocks up there that look kind of structural, right? Now, do I believe there's a moon base on there? Well, I haven't seen any proof. John Lear can point at his pictures and just, I swear to God, I think it'd be funny to maybe take a picture of some stucco or something really close, blow it out white, give it to John Lear, and he'll find space stations on it. But the Milky Way is like a monkey wrench in the whole thing. It's like, Jesus, what is that? You know, I gave an analogy that I can't shake out of my head now. It's been there in my head since I came up with it. But part of my brain was, I said this in an episode that I thought, what if we're simply looking at the edge of an eggshell? What must it look like if you were to be a sentient chicken inside of an egg, but you're really small in the center of the egg and you're looking out? And let's say the egg is not white. Let's say it's very opaque, but it has some porous, thinner areas. And those, by having light on the outside of the shell, shine through. We're rotating in the center, so it's rotating around us. Interesting. What's the Milky Way? Well, it's some weird seam that is very weak in the shell. Very interesting, right? One of the things, again, I've said this several times, but while we're on the subject, and people have been generally fairly nice about their statements of, you know, space doesn't exist, and that's their whole comment, not looking at the fact there's 2 or 3 other guys who said the same thing in the same comment stream. But the fact that, you know, if you want to talk about like the evil Jesuits or the evil group of people, right? Pick your race, pick your prejudice or whatever. The interesting thing is they can get us to actually dislike other human beings simply because we're debating a reality. Well, we're all trying to figure out where we are. I'm assuming that the flat earth folks definitely think that the globers are shallow, gullible. But you have to understand that they think the same of the flat earthers. I don't know how long it's going to be before we have an independent technology platform that is affordable, such that, you know, Joe Schmo millionaire can just hop in his little hovercraft and go straight up, go 80 miles up and start taking pictures and look down and say, oh my God. It's a disc with upturned edges. It's a sphere. The other curiosity, if we just pick it apart just a little bit more, is why, if it was fake, okay, let's say it's orbs that are emitting some sort of plasma, they're just like, it's like a light bulb, right? Then why do all the stars have a different luminosity, right? Why do they have different lumen ratings? Why is that the case? Why wouldn't it be uniform? If it was uniform, does that spell out intent? Is this an ingenious method of instilling on the minds of man or any other sentient creature that lives down here? Look up. You see those random little jewels up there in the sky? Because we have given them varying brightness, you are to assume that this is a random thing and that this is not intentional, that your container is not intentional. It is truly organic, just like you. But let me throw you another scenario real quick. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. But what if, instead of stars, there was nothing? For the entire history of our stay on this planet as a species, there's nothing up there. Yeah, we get a blue sky because we've got a sun. But when we look at the moon, it's like NASA shots, right? Never any stars. They built a space station without a window pointing at space. Yeah, that's because it's so real up there, right? But what would that do to our psyche? Okay, how do we even begin to parse that question? Well, let's just say we roll back history to whenever man showed up, was dropped off, or whatever, created, right when we got the I think therefore I am sort of level of sentient consciousness, and we just erased the stars. So Nut in Egypt, she would be most likely an African woman who's just black. And she is the darkness that's above us. Maybe she wouldn't exist. Don't know. Native Americans would then lack their entire history, their entire philosophy of where a soul goes, because there would be no stars to claim ancestry. Probably wouldn't be much in the way of science fiction, except land-based science fiction. So it'd be more like Blade Runner, and not like Star Wars. Maybe someone would get super clever and somehow claim in a science fiction sense or a sci-fi sense they could duplicate the sun and take it somewhere in the universe, somewhere in the blackness of space. But who the hell wants to do that? What's interesting about the notion of floating in space forever is that even if you can contemplate such a thing, you get hurled out into space, you're in some, I don't know, stasis pod, or you're able to live forever for whatever reason, and there's stars out there. You know that the law of averages would be two things. You would end up going into a sun, which is probably the most likely thing because the gravity on the sun is way more than a planet. But there's a slim chance in hell that you could end up on a asteroid, a moon, or a planet, hopefully with a surface. And you could get out and maybe move around, or at least you could see something you've never seen before, right? But if you were out there in a container and it's black, and for so many years you could look back at the sun and see this little speck of light, but eventually you're not going to see anything, and then it's just a void for the rest of your existence. Well, that's kind of terrifying. Being alive, but being utterly pointless in your existence. You would start creating a reality inside your mind. Probably try to dream all day long. Does space give man a context? And is that something that was intentionally put there? Because let's face it, if we're not completely random in terms of our existence in the universe, and we have a God, or we are God, the one, we're just one being. We just happen to live at the same time under different vessels, but whatever. It's intentionally created. Well, we did this. We put all that stuff out there. It's so funny as I blow the smoke clouds up. You guys can't see it, but it's swirling just as a natural behavior. Is there anything on Earth that's like stars? Is there any fabric of rock or moss that glows that's a bit like the stars? I don't know. I don't think there really is. Maybe when you get up at night to pee and you close your eyes and you can still see little, impressions of your cones and rods. I swear to God, when I get up in the morning and I keep my eyes closed while I'm standing up, I swear I can see my rods and cones as they are laid out in the back of my eyeball. I see the pattern. I see, the rods are small and the cones are big. I think that's the truth about that. My other question for sort of flat earthers is, if you believe this is a firmament dome and they just have little sparklies all over the interior of this thing with no explanation for the thing that we call the Milky Way, it would be, why would that exist in a firmament dome? Like, why? That's a lot of work. If they're truly these plasma balls like Dave seems to be recording, well, that's energy. That's someone working really hard on these things. If the spheres falling from space aren't space debris, then what are they? I mean, if they really are these things, so it seems to be almost man-made and crudely made. The weird thing about those spheres that keep falling from the sky, and what is it, Vietnam, they had like 6 of them a couple of years ago. You know, they look like blown fiberglass spheres. Some of them look like they're made of really heavy metal. It seems a little strange that they would be made. Fiberglass makes sense because it's a lightweight material, but some of these like metal ones, seems like you wouldn't make them out of that necessarily, and they're really small. So it seems odd. It also seems odd that the space agencies, although, you know, we know, I'm going to say this and you're going to roll your eyes because you can imagine it, but that's a very dangerous regiment to have. You know, you launch a rocket or you launch something into space and it's like, what are we going to do with all this? Oh, we just drop them out of the window. Well, you know, imagine, okay, so they're landing in Vietnam. We haven't had one land in Paris, New York, LA, Bangladesh, Shanghai. But can you imagine someone's just filming a relative in Disneyland and here comes one of these orbs and God knows how fast they move. Who knows? No one's ever seen one land. They don't seem to, this is the other thing that's strange. They don't seem to be self-destructing when they hit the ground. They do seem to be burned quite a bit, but they also don't seem to be embedding themselves into the soil like they would if they were moving the average speed of a rocket when it hits orbit. Technically speaking, these things would hit some massive terminal velocity, but if they hit a human being or human beings or a house or a car, we're talking about a massive impact. Let's say it can hit 130 miles an hour. You're going to have human pate everywhere. So far, so good. Hasn't happened. Seems like it would be a possibility. If these things are, you know, falling off some firmament dome, then what's that say about the dome? What's that say about the dome engineers? Certainly seems mortal to me. It doesn't seem like a God-made product to me. But you hear this thing all the time. The old belief of the dome was that it was actually a bubble of water. You know, we're in a bubble of air and it's a water above. Okay, so where are these star things? Are they in the water? I mean, Dave's footage would not exist, in my opinion, if water was between us and it. And then the question is like, okay, so it's a dome. All right, great. What's on the outside of the thing? And then the other question is, why would they rotate? Because regardless if you believe it's a dome or not, they rotate in the sky. Bold photography proves it. Why? Why does it need to rotate? Makes no sense. Heliocentric makes sense. Why those things are moving in a circle. Now, there's all these theories about how you could use an optic to create the South Pole stars versus the North Pole stars. I mean, some really elaborate, amazing optics that people have conceived, which work. It's crazy. But why? You know? Do you do anything that you don't have to in life? I mean, do you just walk out and, you know, clean your car right after you cleaned it? Do you build a wing on the side of your house when you don't really want one? No. You put 2 pairs of pants on just because you can? No. You tend not to do anything that you don't need to do because it creates calorie energy exertion. But the more sentient you are as a being, you've got other things you'd rather be doing. If nothing else, sitting around doing nothing. Because it's fun to watch NASCAR, you know. I am more and more convinced every day, although fractionally so, that the intelligence threshold might be just what's going on here. I think that because I can conceive of it as a human being, that I wouldn't want to get so educated, get so educated that I couldn't enjoy magic, right? Like you know, it's funny. You can technically go online and find out how every magic trick could be done. Now, the great magicians find slightly different ways of doing it. But you wouldn't really want to do that, would you? Because if you did that, you wouldn't be able to enjoy anything. It's really strange. There's a few people in my family that have this too. I don't even know what you call it. Someone told me one day about this ability, and I was like, whoa, that's a real thing, because I think I've got it, which is music. When I hear a song that I really like, if I hear a song I don't like, I tend to ignore it and don't put it into long-term memory. But for some reason, especially classical music, most specifically Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven, but even Rachmaninoff, if I heard any of their beautiful works of music, I so ingested that stuff as a kid that I have all the movements memorized. And what'll be the thing is, like, I have to have someone start it. Typically, I can't remember exactly how everything starts, but once it gets rolling, it's like I go into this sort of, it's kind of two-pronged. It's kind of bliss and it's kind of angst. One, because my mind is my memory is, it's strange. When I look at maps, I can memorize them and then just drive straight to those places. But I see, like I've said it several times, I see everything in a timeline, but I see it all at the same time. And so I have to kind of focus my brain and move it along the timeline as I speak. And when I listen to classical music, I am so aware of the next note, of the next instrument that's going to play, of what, Mozart was trying to do at a particular time, or Bach or whatever, that I want to sing it. I want to sing the notes. I want to just, how we all do those things. But at the same time, my mind is angsting because I want it to be done. Like, I want to hear that next movement and it's not here yet. And so I'm trapped in a linear time problem. And it's because I have knowledge of it that I suffer from this weird thing. And I think that there's a flavor of that with knowing everything about how everything works. Thank God there's mysteries. Thank God there's frontiers. Think about Freud, coming up with his theory about the different regions of the mind. I'm sure while he was coming up with it, it was utterly fascinating. I'm sure he wanted to go to work every single day. But after he came up with his theories, whether he's right or wrong, I'm sure he got kind of bored. Because what was the new thing that was going to occur? By the way, the Oedipus complex, I was talking about this with a friend. I'm going to digress on you guys hardcore from space for 1 second. Oedipus complex is that you want to make love to your mother, kill your father. And there's all kinds of examples of this in history. One, we probably at some point were a pack animal. We were harems. Just like, I'm not saying we were monkeys or anything like that, but cats do it, lions do it. And how does it work within a particular species? Before there was an idea of incest, before, we had morals and, we had a basis and a code for reality, we hung out. Our father was probably the big guy, right? And he killed off anyone else that was messing with him, which is how he earned his keep. Then he gets to sleep with every female in the entire pack. But as a son of your father, you're going to have to, if you want to get laid, you're going to have to knock the old man off his rocker. You're going to have your brothers to mess with, your ancestral brothers. And then as soon as you become the alpha male, which is only really one predominant alpha male in any pack creature, then you get to sleep with, technically, your sisters and your mother. Maybe that if that truly exists, it's merely the modern form of that recessed instinct gene in us, because that's the way we might have lived for a really, really long time. I'm just going to say, thank God those days are over. On the subject of intelligence threshold, as it relates to understanding what space is and where we are in this place that we are, I will say that similar to the angst I might feel, a mathematician might feel, when you try to say, conceive of every number, go. And your body goes, you feel like your chest implodes. It's an infinite concept trying to fit inside of a finite container. You can't do it. No human, I would say, outside of a divine being that's not human, could ever possibly conceive of that. It would be interesting to see if God himself could conceive of all the numbers that could possibly exist all at the same time, because it's an infinite growing paradigm. It infinitely goes up and it infinitely goes down. So it's sort of a paradox of consciousness. When I push into these thought processes of what is space, what are those stars, what is the Milky Way, does this crap really exist, have all those galaxy shots been, airbrushed or, computer simulated or whatever. It'd be interesting to know when the very first picture of a galaxy ever showed up. I'll actually make an effort to look that up and put it on the screen. But the angst I feel a little bit inside is sort of like a pushback. Don't think about that. It's sort of how I feel. Like another outside force is sort of pushing on my chest. Don't think about that. I'm going to take your breath away if you think about that. Oh God, fuck, let me just figure out what my backyard's all about, So I'd be interested in your opinion of whether or not you have any angst really going after these potential paradigms of infinity. Because let's face it, space will eventually achieve an infinite paradigm in your brain. If it's heliocentric ball, then you're definitely in this realm of like, okay, how big's the container? How many stars are out there? I mean, they'll tell you, but give me a break. We have no clue. If we can't see the center of our galaxy as a big bright sun, a bunch of millions and billions of stars all closely compact together, and that's not some gigantic star in the sky lighting us up during the day and the night. I mean, there shouldn't be any night. There shouldn't be any night if we're right next to our own galaxy center. I mean, we're not technically, as they say, next to the center, but I mean, what's happening to all the light? If you believe in ether, then there's an explanation. The verbal wave of light, because it's not a particle, it's a reaction of concussion, it would eventually die down because it's getting slammed by counter ether going the other way, and eventually, just like a sound wave that dies off, you can't hear someone yelling at you 2 miles away on an average day. You can't see the sun at the center of the galaxy, or the sunlight from all the millions and billions of stars theoretically at the center of our galaxy, right? But here's the paradox, right? We can't seem to see this giant cluster of stars at the center of our galaxy. However, NASA and all these observatories have no problem seeing other galaxies in the universe. Well, how's that possible? Right? How is that possible? Either light travels that far or it doesn't travel that far. And if it does travel that far, then our own galaxy should be, again, a blinding ribbon in the sky. Blinding. Like star tape, I hope, if nothing else, this episode reminds you of how much we're not really taught to think. Because I have consumed, I don't know, probably not technically 100 books on the subject, but probably easily 50. I used to get 2 books a month for 3 years, consuming all of it. Not all of it was cosmology related, but I mean, all the magazines I've ever read, all the college classes I've ever taken on the subject. I took college astronomy. I got 103 in college as my final score. Never took a note. But the dudes, we even had the guy from NASA come for a whole week, and he was like unbelievable, man. The guy was like, had us on the edge of our seats. But none of this stuff's ever explained. None of the paradoxes are ever explained. Because a lot of times, you'll learn something and a good teacher will say, Now, you might wonder why it's like this. Well, let me tell you. Boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden your question that's deep inside your mind is answered even if you weren't able to fully construct it to the teacher and raise your hand. So, we've only had 2 listeners out of 513 shows. I finally looked it up today. There's probably at least 3 that are unpublished, but because they're just like me messing around with the previous episodes. But of all the other ones, we've only had 2 folks report in that they have ever dreamed of being on the Enterprise. I asked Sid Mead the question, if he'd ever dreamed of space, and he had a very kind of acid trippy dream. When I asked him to describe it to me, which what's interesting about Sid describing something to you is it's not some average, well, it was sort of kind of like this, but he was talking about being kind of hurled through the universe very, very quickly. And now I would simply say that was just you visiting your home, like your own planet. But one of the kids said he dreamed about being on the Enterprise, and he said, well, I was on a bunch of cough syrup and other medication for a really bad cold. So he was good enough to let us know that was part of the experiment that he was under. So let me know what you think. I mean, I really, really, really do want Globers to not be pissed off at flat earthers and flat earthers not to be pissed off at Globers. Just understand that the way the information came to each group of individuals, you ended up where you ended up. I say this every time I bring up the subject, but, being a heliocentric person, not out of any peer pressure, but because of expanding Earth, I can't say that I have seen any proof other than expanding Earth. That is like the biggest piece of proof that all the continents fit together on all sides. Just erase the oceans, and with very little reshaping of anything. I mean, just minute scooting. No subduction, meaning no plates go underneath other plates to make it work. I'm sure there's plates. I'm sure they go sliding around a little bit, but continents don't. The continents don't slide on some ball bearing, layer, beneath. The oceans are new soil. It's new plates that are coming out of the interior of the Earth. We've proven it, absolutely proven it by labeling a plate down the seam of the Pacific and then watching it over 25 years pop out, and there's a new plate coming up. But if you're a proponent that has commented several times on other people's videos, space doesn't exist. That's all you write. Try to go deeper. Try to go deeper into that. Okay, you're saying it doesn't exist. So I'm asking you, what are those stars? You can't tell me they're behind water. It doesn't work that way, because Dave's photography, go to our Facebook and join that group and look up Dave's posts, and you'll see just with a little camera, I think he's utterly proven that between us and those stars, there's no water. That's for sure. Our atmosphere doesn't seem to be affecting it either. Much. So again, try to dig deeper in your brain. You could have the answer. You could have an epiphany, having the thought for the very first time, trying to answer an enigma that we're all waiting for. And then you crack it. But if you never try, if you hang on to your own cliches that you type in responses, type in comments, then you're not growing and you're not being deep. You're just having a thought and you're regurgitating into the text. I'm assuming that anyone that says space doesn't exist and they offer nothing else about the subject, they can talk about other things in their comment, but they don't offer any more explanation. They never thought about it, really. Anyway, I think that's all I got on that one. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. If anything, just bookmark it, forget it. In case the show gets moved around, YouTube gets really draconian, you'll always have BitChute, and we'll find some other place if that has a problem. Again, I've said this a couple times, I'm going to say it again. For all these rumors that, YouTube is canceling channels because of this content or that content, I was watching something the other day and they were saying that, it was a guy said that his video on JFK being alive was shut down, shut off. Well, I got the same episode, so mine's still up. Strange. Very, very strange. Maybe I should go check it. But I just referred someone to it, and it was still fully functional. I think it's even monetized. So anyway, we have 2 video, YouTube, BitChute. Get a BitChute account. If nothing else, just to support them. We have all the podcasts you could ever want. The website has a search field and category list in case you just like one type of video. It's all in there for you. We have the social media, which is a locked Facebook group, Twitter, and minds.com, which is a duplicate of Facebook, but freedom of speech protected. We have a couple ways to donate to the show. One is PayPal, and the other one is Patreon. For everybody who donates, thank you so much. You're getting the credits forever. You get a 20% discount on the store, and you get the episodes before everyone else gets them. We do have a store. It has 2 shirts for Season 5. They'll be gone as soon as Season 5 is over, so make sure and get your copy. We have an all-new remastered Season 1, so if you're looking for Season 1 on this channel, it doesn't exist, but that's because it's on the website. I remastered them all, so it's much better now. But anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.